Today's novel is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, alongside We and 1984. It's one of the three most famous dystopian novels in the world. The novel is set in the year AF 632, where AF stands for After Ford. The timeline starts from 1908, the year Henry Ford created the Model T. So, the story takes place in the year 2540, roughly 5 years from now. As you can guess from the term AF, Henry Ford, the inventor of the assembly line, is worshipped as a god in this society. Curious as to why? Now, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Let's throw it now. Thomas, the director of Central London Hatchery and Conditioning Center, takes the student on a tour of the center. He explains that creating the gamma, delta, and epsilon classes, which are below the elite alpha and middle class beta classes, requires a special process involving the eggs. This process allows the production of dozens of twins. Henry Foster, an employee at the center, added to the director's explanation by describing how features are conditioned for predetermined classes and jobs. For example, to create the epsilon class, they reduce oxygen level to lower intelligence, or for children who will work in tropical climates, they condition them to adapt to heat. He also introduces the process of conditioning young children to be content with their assigned class. Just like cars are produced on an assembly line, children are efficiently produced to fit the desired class and purpose. This is why Henry Ford is worshipped, and the calendar is based on After Ford. During the tour, the students meet Mustafa Mond, one of the 10 world controllers. He gives a speech to the students, explaining that stability is ultimately the most important thing needed. Meanwhile, Lenina Crown, a nurse at the center, receives advice from her colleague, Fanny Crown. Fanny tells her that she shouldn't be seeing only one man for 4 months and that she should date multiple people. This is because forming exclusive relationships is forbidden. Upon hearing this, Lenina asks Bernard Marx, an Alpha Plus, out on a date. Bernard is not a popular man. Society conditions people to believe that being tall was a sign of importance, but Bernard was short. As a result, despite his high caste, he always feels inferior. Unlike others, he is reluctant to use soma, a drug distributed by the state, and he disapproved of casual relationships, making him an outsider who couldn't fit into the system. Because of this, he had a poor reputation among his peers. When someone as popular as Lenina asked him out, everyone was shocked, including Bernard himself. After making plans with Lenina, Bernard goes to meet his friend Helmut Watson. Like Bernard, Helmut was an Alpha Plus, but he is strong, capable, and popular with women. However, because he was much smarter than others, he often felt like an outsider. Despite their differences, Bernard and Helmut were close friends because neither of them could fully adapt to the system. A few days later, after spending time with Bernard, Lenina thinks he's a bit strange. However, since she wanted to visit the Savage Reservation for her vacation, she decided to spend her holiday with Bernard. Bernard was one of the few people who could get permission to enter the Savage Reservation. The Savage Reservation was a place where people who had not been civilized lived. They still held on to old world cultures and traditions. The world state encloses them with electric fences, turning the area into a reservation under its control. Bernard goes to director Thomas to get his Savage Reservation permit signed. Thomas signed the permit and tells about the time he visited the Savage Reservation around 20 years ago with a beta-woman. He explains that the woman disappeared during the trip and he had to return alone. After receiving the permit, Bernard and Lenina travel to the Savage Reservation and observe a dance festival performed by the Savages. There, they meet a savage named John. John is white and speaks to them in English. They also meet John's mother, Linda. Linda is a very overweight white woman, and she is extremely happy to see Bernard and Lenina. Linda explains that she had once lived in the civilized world, but got lost during a vacation to the Savage Reservation and was unable to return. She shares that she became pregnant with the child of the man she had traveled with, and the shame of becoming a mother forced her to live among the savages. In the civilized world state, where all humans are born through artificial hatching, the word mother and father were considered extremely obscene and offensive. Bernard realizes that Linda is the same woman who had traveled with director Thomas. He then comes up with a plan to get revenge on Thomas, who had always disliked him and wanted to exile him to an island. His plan is to bring Linda and John back to London. Upon returning to the center, Bernard brings Linda and director Thomas face to face in front of a large crowd. Linda tells Thomas, "I became pregnant with your child and gave birth, making me a mother." And John calls Thomas father. The crowd is horrified, and Thomas flees in shame. Linda, who had missed Soma for decades and was in poor health, is admitted to the hospital, where she is continually given Soma. People are eager to see John, the savage, and he quickly becomes famous. Since meeting John requires going through Bernard, he too becomes famous. However, Bernard begins to change. He starts using Soma and engages in numerous casual relationships. Watching Bernard's transformation, Helmholtz feels pity for him. Helmholtz and John naturally become friends. Helmholtz is a lecturer in writing, and John loves literature so much that he had memorized a copy of Shakespeare he found in the Savage Reservation. John soon stops meeting the people Bernard brought to see him. This was because he struggled to accept a civilization so vastly different from the moral values he had grown up with. As a result, Bernard's reputation worsens again. Meanwhile, Lenina had developed feelings for John. John, too, is attracted to the beautiful Lenina from the beginning. One day, Lenina goes to see John. John is excited by her sudden visit, but when Lenina, without love, undresses and approaches him purely for sex, he is horrified. He angrily calls her a whore and criticizes her. At that moment, a call comes from the hospital, informing him that Linda is dying. John, watching Linda die from her Soma addiction, feels disgusted by the civilization when he sees nurses bringing young children to get them accustomed to death. He then causes trouble at the distribution center, throwing the drug around in a fit of rage. Eventually, he is arrested by the police. Bernard, Helmholtz, and John are summoned to the office of Mustafa Moon, the controller. There, the controller tells them that he too once realized the flaws of the system and almost got exiled to an island, but he decided to maintain and protect the current order, which led him to his current position. He informs them that Bernard and Helmholtz will be sent to an island. Bernard falls to his knees and begs the controller not to send him away, but his request is denied. Helmholtz asks to be sent to the same island as Bernard, so he can look after him. John tells the controller that the current world is wrong, but the controller explains with various arguments that the current system is the best way to ensure stability and peace, leaving John speechless. The next day, before Bernard leaves, he apologizes to John. John tells the controller that he had asked to be sent to the island with Bernard and Helmut, but the controller refused. Bernard and Helmut leave for the island, and John begins living in isolation in a remote place. However, the public's attention turns to him, and he is constantly disturbed by people, including visits from broadcasters. Overcome with rage, John rushes out at the crowds, and even Lenina comes back to see him, arriving by helicopter. In a fit of fury, John, having lost his mind, publicly whipped Lenina in front of the onlookers, driving her away. After regaining his senses, John realizes what he has done and, overwhelmed by guilt, takes his own life, marking the end of the novel. A representative novel of dystopia, the opposite of utopia, Brave New World depicts a world that has been transformed into an extremely efficient and stable society. Unlike 1984, which portrays a world where complaints are suppressed through censorship, Brave New World shows a society where people feel no need to complain, which is why these two novels are often compared. The main character, John, memorizes Shakespeare's plays like The Tempest, and often quotes them. The phrase Brave New World is directly taken from The Tempest, and it became the title of the novel. Thank you for watching this video. I'll come back with other maps.